I'm Kara, and welcome to Soul Inspiring Business. I believe that all of us possess unique gifts and talents that allow us to serve the world and our own growth in the highest possible way. Our lives are an expression of our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. And here, we will explore businesses, thought leaders, and topics designed to inspire, helping propel your own growth so you can live your best and most purposeful life. Welcome to Soul Inspiring Business. Welcome back to the Soul Inspiring Business podcast. Today, I'm joined by Leesa McGregor. I am so thrilled to have her here. We were introduced by a friend, and she just was somebody that I thought has to be on the show. And welcome, Leesa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Kara. So wonderful to connect and have this conversation. I'm excited.
Me too. Well, and it was funny because when I was talking to my friend and she was like telling me about how she met you and was so inspired and talking about how you had this divinely inspired book that sort of flowed through you onto the pages and now out into the world. It's called A New Alphabet for Humanity. It's a children's book. And when she was saying that, I just thought, gosh, we talk a lot on this show about following inspired guidance and, really kind of tuning in and listening to what God, our creator, the universe, is trying to tell us. And then taking action on that. And so when I heard this, I thought, oh my goodness, we have to speak to Leesa. Not only do I love just how it all happened and your courage to listen to that guidance, but the message of the book, which really is designed to empower our children, to help them really unleash their potential and to give them vocabulary about these things that I just think is so important. So again, without further ado, welcome. I'm so thrilled you're here and would love for you to kind of tell us a little bit more about your story and how this all came about.
Oh, thank you so much, Kara. Yeah, it's actually quite a fascinating story. I laugh because I tell people, the truth is I never actually had an aspiration to become a children's author. I never set a goal or said I want to write a children's book. I actually wrote the book because I really, really wanted to change the world. That's the truth. I had this heart desire. I had this yearning inside. And that came from many years of actually feeling quite unfulfilled. And, I'd had a very successful career when I was in my 20s. I traveled the world. I built companies. And, I realized by the time I was in my mid-20s that I was having this nagging feeling inside that was like, that question that a lot of us get faced with at some point or other in our lives, which is this all there is? You go down a certain path and you think that's it, right? Whatever it is, money, career, success, achievement. And I just really started to feel very unsettled about my whole life. And so I tell the story about how I was, during the day, I'd be in my corporate job and in the ivory tower doing my work. And at night I was in my, on my yoga mat crying, going, what am I doing? Like, what is my life about? And, at that time I really, it's actually quite remarkable when I look back because I started to bring in a journaling practice. And I was writing in my journal quite often. And one of the things that kept coming up was this question that I would write down. And it was like, how can I make a meaningful difference? How can I contribute to the health and the well-being of people and the planet? And at that time I was very inspired by a lot of the sustainability movement that was happening around the world. There was like renewable energy and, there was a real eco vibe that was really taking off everywhere. And I was living in Australia at the time. And I just thought, I just want to do something that's meaningful. And I remember feeling, this one day I was delivering this presentation in a boardroom and it was like my inner voice was like, kind of nagging at me and saying, if you're so successful, then why do you feel so unfulfilled? Like, are you really using these skills and talents to your best ability? Like, it was like, I knew I wasn't. And I knew something had to change. So this really became kind of a guiding force for me going down this soul journey of trying to understand, what my purpose was and how could I align myself? How could I align my skills and my talents to do something that would be meaningful in my eyes, and something for the world. And so, what's really magical about this whole story is that when my son came along, I started to get even clearer about that. And I started to think about, this sense of, having this sense of responsibility as a parent. And I'm sure you went through a similar phase with your children. It's like you really start to realize the importance of, what is your contribution? How can you make the world better? How can you leave the world in a better place than you found it? You now have a child, and it's like, wow, you want to be part of the change. You want to be that role model.
Absolutely.
And I started writing in my journal at that time, how can I do something that will create a positive difference with my son's generation? And how can I positively impact future generations? I started getting very inspired by this idea of doing something that could positively impact future generations. And I've always said that, as an entrepreneur, there's so many opportunities for us to really work out, how to be part of the solution. We can see in the world now that so many of the systems we've relied on all these years are breaking down, political, economic, social. There's just so many things that we can do to create change in the world. And one of the things that I felt really passionate about was this idea of creating systems change in education, of all things. So the funny thing is, I started writing in my journal, how can I create systems change in education? Little did I know that this was going to come in the form of a children's book.
Wow.
So, and I kind of give all that back context, because that really set the stage for what happened next,
Well,
yeah. So go ahead.
Well, it's what I was going to say, and just jump in, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but also the question, I love that the journaling, so much of it is just asking the question, because sometimes when we talk about, well, how do you know what you want to do? Because sometimes I'll ask, well, what do you want for your life? What do you, it's many times I don't know, right? Because we're not supposed to know always in the moment. It's in the asking of the questions then that we start to gain further clarity. And there's, I'm sure, you've heard it, but the quality of your life is dependent by the quality of your questions, right? I might be butchering that quote, but it's about, like, how do we ask really good questions to get the clarity? Because if you don't have it now, it's still possible. It's just in asking the right questions and allowing the unfolding. So that's so powerful. And so anyway, so go on.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. And I'm so grateful you shared that, because that really is the essence of what I'm sharing, is that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your questions that you ask. I think it was Tony Robbins that said that years ago. My husband actually used to work with Tony Robbins in the coaching area. And it's that was really the guiding force. It was like, ask the question, write it in the journal. And and I'm honestly I'm just blown away at this point. Just that very process, of really tuning in, asking, what is your heart desire? What is it that you really feel called to do? Now, the question, that may not come right away. As you said, it may not be clear to you at that very time when you're asking the question. But what I feel is so magical about life and the universe is that things can come when you least expect it. And so for myself, I started writing these things in my journal when my son was young. And when he was really I think it was probably around the age of like 1 or 2, somewhere in between that time. And then when he was 3, we were at the beach one day, we were playing in the sand, and he looked at me and he locked eyes with me. And it's like his soul was speaking to me. And he was like, Mom, it was like he was saying, Mom, what else have you got for me? And I realized that I was this gung-ho mother. I had taught him the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, letters, colors, numbers, all the things. And I thought in that very moment, why is it that we're not teaching our children from an early age the language of the heart, how to connect with their hearts, how to be a good human? And so in that moment, I actually got the idea. It was like, wow, what if I were to create a new alphabet with new conscious words that would help him to connect with his heart and just learn this new conscious language. Mm-hmm. And so I got this stream of consciousness, and I had a notepad. I started writing it down, and I was like, oh, A is for abundance. B is for bravery, C is for compassion, G is for gratitude. And so I got all of these words, I wrote them down, and I came home and I shared them with my husband, and he was like, oh my gosh. He goes, Leesa, this is $1 billion idea. Like, this is unbelievable. You've just rewritten the alphabet. And so then the funny part was my son got all excited. He wanted to learn these words. And so he started to recite them and talk about them. And I thought, wow, there's something to this. And I shared it with a few of my mom friends. And they said, this is brilliant. I want to teach my kids these words. And so then my husband's like, I think you should write a children's book. And I had written a previous children's book about how we took my son traveling around the world. And that was a really heartfelt project. And I realized, wow, I do have a gift for writing, and I do love this creative process. And I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write a book. Now, of course, being an entrepreneur, I laugh because when I look back, because I was so determined to do it in a way that I felt made sense. So instead of going and shopping the idea around with publishers, I thought, you know what? If the market really wants this, let's test it. And so we set up a crowdfunding campaign, and we did this video, and we said, okay, we put it on Kickstarter, and we said, if people want this, then, they'll vote with their dollars. And so basically we launched the campaign. Within 48 hours, on my birthday, my husband calls me in the morning and he goes, did you see that your campaign's been fully funded? And I'm like, what? And I looked, someone had pledged $3,000 toward the campaign. And I had a flood of people that came in and pledged, within that first launch. And I was just crying. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I mean, just you put your heart out there with a creative idea. People say, yes, we want to support you in this. It was just the most incredible experience. And so then it was like game on. You've tested this idea, people want it, you've got people that have put the money towards your campaign. And so that summer became, it was honestly magical. And it was also like, wow, I had to get over my creative insecurities. I had to move forward at this point. And it was like, we were talking about that earlier about, when you get a divine idea or some sort of inspiration, how do you follow through? Well, for me, I think that was kind of easy because I had this on the line, it was like the idea was there, and right. You just had to move forward.
But to be clear, some people, there are some that may not have taken the action to put it on and crowdfund to begin with, right? Yeah. Because they get lost in their head, right? Yes. So like having the courage, number one, to have the idea, to have, there's a few different things in there, I think, that all make it work. Number one, to have the idea. Number two, to have a supportive partner who's totally encouraging and, and gives life to it for you as well, and sees what you see and supports you. And then number three, to take the courage to like bring it to the world and say, okay, what do you think about it? And then to get that affirmative, like, yes,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it really was a eureka moment, just that whole experience of receiving the idea. It was just, I'll just never forget it. I mean, it was just the most inspired idea that I think I've ever had. And, and it was a magical time. And I actually tell people, the truth is, I don't even think I wrote the book. I actually think when I was in the creative process, I actually felt like it was being channeled. And it sounds a little out there, but it was like, I don't even remember. I remember a few instances where I was like talking to my husband saying, what do you think of this sentence versus this sentence? But most of it just kind of came through this channel. It was really profound. Wow. And there was pressure as well to meet certain timeframes, right? And I laugh because I've spoken to a lot of authors, and they said, it took me a couple of years to write my book. It took me this. And for me, I laugh because it was like 6 months from idea to literally on the production run, with the printers. And, we had our first 5,000 books printed, and it was quite a fast process, even my illustrator getting everything together. So it was amazing. And, what happened from there was also quite profound. So we started to stock the book in some local retail shops. And I was still a little bit insecure at this point. I thought, do people want this? And now the funny part is we actually got the idea to make it like a nice bright yellow color, and it's very colorful. And
Yes.
so the shop owners started to contact me and say, "Hey, Leesa, we're out of books. We're out of books. We've run out of books again." And I thought, "Oh, wow, there's something to this. This is amazing, right? Like this is happening." It started to take on its own momentum after the crowdfunding and we delivered those books.
Right.
Anyway, long story short, COVID hit and all the shops closed down. So it was like, wow, I just started this venture. I guess it was a business at this point, and everything started to dry up. And I'm going, what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I said to my husband, well, I've been in online marketing a long time. Let's just put it online. Let's see what happens. Let's continue with the online mission. So we hired someone to help us and we launched a campaign. And what happened from there is really nothing short of miraculous. We put it up online, and within 4 months, we did $1 million in sales. It was just crazy.
Wow.
So it blew up. It went up all over the world. And I started, what was really interesting for me as an entrepreneur, and that's one of the reasons I'm sharing that, is not so much about the number, because it is fascinating. I mean, as an entrepreneur, I always thought it would be cool. How do you create a multi-million-dollar company in less than 12 months? How do you do that? But when I check in with myself and I look back and I think about that, when we hit the $1 million mark, what meant way more to me than the number on the balance sheet was the people at that point that had been writing into me. And they started to write to me and say, Leesa, this is the best children's book ever written. I came and bought one, and I want 5 more. I need 10 more. I want to give it to all my family and friends. I had teachers saying, this belongs in every school and every early learning center and every classroom. And, I'll get emotional when I think about this, but it's just so profound, because in my journal, I was writing, how can I impact future generations? And I had a few people that wrote in and said to me, Leesa, this book is going to be handed down to future generations. And I was like, how could I have done this? Like, it was so profound to have had that experience, like that heart's desire. I want to do something meaningful for the world. I want to impact the world in a meaningful way. And then to have that reflected back to me was something that I just, I say to my husband at this point, if I never did anything else in this lifetime, I'm pretty happy. Like that was the defining moment for me. It was like, wow, this work was put out in the world. It was recognized. It was honored. And it was just a beautiful experience. And I wish that for everybody, I wish that for everyone. And, and just the impact has been phenomenal. I mean, I got a note last week from a fellow in India that's been distributing my book. And he says, look, I'm presenting it to the Ministry of Education. I really think this book needs to be in the schools. And, I just get these magical things happening all the time. Yeah. And it's really kind of, obviously, it just sort of helped me to further the mission and the vision for what's really possible. And, and it's been an amazing journey. It's been up and down as well, as having a child and just like raising your family and running and growing a business at the same time. But I just feel so passionate and inspired about this idea of really aligning with your divine purpose, which I think, is really simple. It's like, it's to love and to serve. It's figuring out, how can we be of service? How can we be of contribution? How can we contribute our skills, our gifts, our talents in a way that's really meaningful? Yes. And, for me now at this point, I mean, it's just amazing. We've created this, we've just passed the 100,000 book mark. So we've distributed 100,000 books around the world. During the process of building the company, I always tell people I became an accidental publisher. I thought, I really want to make the biggest difference that I can. And so I got this idea that if we're taking paper, to print the books, we should put it back. And so for every book that we sell, we plant a tree. So I'm really happy and proud to say that we've planted 100,000 trees now, and we're just getting started. It's just quite phenomenal.
It's amazing too. So I was like covered in goosebumps when you were like talking about just the feeling of, again, it's not the numbers, it's the impact, right? It's like knowing that what you are putting out into the world is creating impact, not just for, for our generation, but as you said, for future generations. And how beautiful to hear you tell the story in that way. And, for you to really have, I mean, I think some of the things that come to mind too is when when something like this happens, it's easy to look at the last 12 months, but it's actually like all the preparation from even
Yes.
the time when in your 20s and probably way before that, where you're learning and growing in your perceptions of the world and all the experiences that then shape who you are.
Yes.
And then, as you mentioned, even just like the journey of you'd had online marketing experience. So then like how, then COVID happens. And so it, and the world feels a need for more compassion and humanity. And this comes at the time where we're all craving that more and more. And so it's a culmination of the journey that is now still continuing and just starting, really.
Yes.
But that is, all kind of, it's all the pieces that brought you here. And so for anybody listening too that is feeling inspired and also feeling like, well, what do I contribute or what do I have to contribute? It's leaning into the questions of like, what are my gifts? What are the things that I'm good at? And how can I be of service in the best possible way? Because we can look at lots of different professions that are, service. Like, I don't know that many people would look at like real estate for me and be, like, oh, you're such a service person. But I really feel like I am to the clients that I serve because I really approach business and everything that I do in that way. And then that has, of course, expanded and grown in a way because everything comes from the heart and from service. So I wanted to highlight that part, which I think is really beautiful. And then also, just to be able to create something like this for our children, to use these words in a way that have meaning, because I think as parents, as a mom of three, I know that sometimes it's hard to put in the words of what does gratitude feel like? What does it look like? And having a playbook almost to be able to work from, to be able to talk through these things is so powerful.
Oh, I love what you just shared. And it's true. I mean, and our service can take so many different forms. Our contribution can take forms. It can real estate, anything, and actually, touching on that point about about gratitude, the funniest part about the book is I actually wrote the book for us as busy entrepreneurs, actually. And the funniest thing is the book resonates like with parents, teachers, grandparents, but the entrepreneurs absolutely love it because I realized that when my son was young, and I've always been busy, I've always had different things. My husband and I have run companies for years. And I remember I would get to the end of the day sometimes, and I would feel like I'd feel a little sad because I'd say, well, what did I teach my child today? What did I do to really give him a life lesson or some sort of wisdom? Like, what did I do? And so I secretly wrote the book to spark those meaningful conversations and have daily reminders for living, So the book, what's fascinating about it is it's kind of, it's like life lessons, life wisdom, all packaged in the form of a children's book and these very simple sentences. But just a daily reminder, and I thought that, and it's funny because people write into me all the time. They said, the thing I love most about your book is it starts a conversation, So it's like, G is for gratitude. Gratitude is thinking about all the things that make me smile. I am grateful when I give thanks for my day and the people that I love. And in the back of the book, I have questions, what is it that you're grateful for? And, so it's just really, I'm so happy that it kind of came through. The project really came through with that original intention, was how can we spark meaningful conversations with our children and, really impart these values? How do we teach them how to be good humans from the very beginning, but it's fascinating to think. I just never thought I'd be a children's author. It's actually kind of amusing because, people will write into me and they'll say, can you autograph my book? And I laugh because I don't even think it's registered with me that I'm even really an author. It's kind of funny.
Are. Yeah, that's amazing.
It's quite amusing.
It's
but, and what I would say to that point is that I think our purpose takes on different forms in our lifetime. Sometimes it could be this phase. I mean, I've built different companies. I've done different things. It can take on so many different forms. And I always laugh with my children. My I have two children in their 20s, and I say, don't worry about not knowing exactly what you want to be when you grow up, because we're still all trying to work it out at an older age. It
That's
feels
true.
like it's an ongoing question. Like I said, I think it takes on different forms. But if we come back to that principle, we're here to love and we're here to serve in some way. Then we give ourselves opportunities to open that up and say, well, what does that look like?
Yes. One of my favorite affirmations by Marianne Williamson is I am programmed no more, no less than to be the highest actualization of myself on this planet and creatively manifest for my highest good and the highest good of others. And that's just it, right? Because then you're open to, like, how can I be of service, and just being open to being the highest expression of yourself. And as you said, that may look different in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. And as you go through life, because at different phases, you're going to learn different things that prepare you for the next phase, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
now I know before the show, we had talked a little bit about manifestation, and you were talking about manifesting and vision boards, and that actually the home you're in now was basically a direct manifestation from a vision board. So I'd love to hear what that process just looks like for you when you think about, how to manifest more of what you want and creating vision. I know that's been a big part of your journey. So I'd love to hear your process for that and any tips for our listeners.
Yeah, thank you. It's, it's interesting because I laugh and tell people I realized I was a master manifester from my 20s before manifestation was even a thing, before the movie The Secret came out and we were talking about it in these ways. And I realized, I think really, my husband and I feel very passionate about this idea that, you really need to devote a considerable amount of time to thinking about what it is that you desire and design your life, and I think so many of us get so busy, and it's very easy to say, well, I'm just so busy and I just don't have time. And it's like, but your life is your most important, your life is a work of art, and how do you create a living masterpiece out of your life? And so for myself, it's been a combination of things. I think it's a combination of definitely journaling. Journaling has been a very sacred practice. And I'm always so blown away when I look back on my journal and see what I wrote. And then here it is. It comes into form. I had written for years that I had this idea to live in an architect design home. That was always my dream. And I remember when I was younger, my mom would say, wouldn't it be amazing to live in a dream home? And, then all of a sudden this house. So I said, I wanted to live in an architect designed home in the rainforest overlooking the ocean. And this home just literally appeared last year. It just came out of the ether. It was just absolutely profound. And it was another reminder, just like the book was a reminder, that we are creating our lives and our experience. And so if we are too busy and we say that we don't have time to really stop and write out a vision for our life, or write out, the intentions or goals that we have, then there's a problem. We're not going to get there, and I think now we live in this world that is so designed to distract us, really. And I feel quite passionate about that, especially for those of us that are creative visionaries, which is probably a lot of the time ADHD, and you've got different ideas for what you want to do. We've got to really harness this ability to tune in and get clear on the things that matter most. What is our mission? What is our vision? What are our values? And then also visualize that, see that in your mind's eye. I look at some of the classic manifestation law of attraction teachers. Neville Goddard says, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Use your imagination, use the power of your imagination. What's interesting is I wrote, I is for imagination in my book. And I realized that imagination is something that is underutilized, especially in this time when we've got access to all this information and things at our fingertips. We don't have to think, we don't have to, do that for ourselves. And I think it's very important. So I believe that manifestation is really about tuning in, setting an intention, writing it down, visualizing it, and just believing that it's possible as well. Like, really believe it. Just put it out to the universe.
Mhm.
and just not be attached, just put it out there and just see how it comes into form.
Yeah. And believing, I think, in possibility, I think is the thing that can sometimes be harder for people, because if it
Yeah.
seems so impossible, then it can. So I think, to your point, like trying to really get in the feeling of, right, of that being true. And sometimes I think even using words like I'm on my way to X,
Yes.
or I'm on my way, because that's a little easier than I have this, when you feel so
Yes.
far from that,
It's
Um,
true.
so I've found that for my own self, like that can be a helpful tip for navigating that when it feels like so foreign, from where you are now.
Absolutely. I'm on my way. And I would say too, I mean, for some of us, we have the opportunity to travel. I always go back to, how did I get inspired? How did I receive divine inspiration for ideas for my life? And that came from traveling. I left my hometown when I was 18. I went to London, England, got a job working at, a Harrods department store doing these things. And I realized, wow, I took myself out of the box that I had grown up in, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the time when I realized, wow, like there is a multitude of possibilities for our lives. We have the capacity to create unimaginable change and possibilities for ourselves, just by simply stepping out of the norm or stepping out of routine. So I feel like travel is a big piece. If you can just get away and have that experience where your mind is thinking in a different direction, it can really spark those ideas for what's possible.
Yeah. And I think the other piece, which, I think you've kind of touched on as well, but it's also like who you surround yourself with too, because those people and those ideas. And so if you don't have the opportunity to travel, look at some even locally, or, not too far away, but somewhat close, where you can driving distance to get into some circles that are maybe bigger thinking than where you've been. So like looking at also your circle and what you're feeding your mind, because that plays such a role into what we think is possible.
Yeah. So true.
And
So
which is
true.
why having, this amazing book for our kids, to be able to help them think about what's possible and think in these more conscious terms from the start, is so huge. So, so I'm so grateful for your time today. I am excited for people to listen to this and to, reach out to you with any questions and see and get the book and really be part of this movement. So, so thank you so, so much for all of your time. And please share with us how we can get the book. I'm assuming it's on Amazon, but where else should we be getting it?
Yeah, absolutely, Carol. Well, thank you so much. I love this conversation. I'm so grateful that we've connected, and I'm happy for people to either go to Amazon. If you come to my website, it's alphabetforhumanity.com. And I always say, we've got a children's empowerment kit there. So I actually developed an entire curriculum, both for parents and for teachers. So every week you can download a word of a week lesson plan, and you can talk about how do you teach your child about abundance? How do you teach your child about bravery? And it gives ideas and suggestions for how to do that. So you can either come to alphabetforhumanity.com or just Amazon. And, and I would just say to your listeners, have that idea in your mind. You're never too small to make a difference, never too small to make a difference, and give yourself the benefit of knowing that anything is really possible. And something small can actually be something really big and profound, and you can impact the world in immeasurable ways just simply by having that intention.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And I love that. Loved being here with you today, and would love to connect with you more over on Instagram. My handle is linked to the show notes, or you can just type in @KaraChafin_Donofrio. And I have something special for you as a free gift, my Dynamic Life Journal. This special book has the power to really help you live a soul-inspired life. Go to freegiftfromkara.com. Easy to remember, freegiftfromkara.com. Until next time, beautiful people, sending all my love.